Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional from Navi, Mumbai, Mr. Raghav Narsalay. Raghav, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh, so much for inviting me to
Thank
this
you.
wonderful podcast.
Thank you. Raghav is the founder of the 100 Rupees Ambulance. In his professional life, he's a partner and leader of the Research and Insights Hub at PricewaterhouseCoopers India. So, Raghav, before we talk about the 100 Rupees Ambulance, tell me a little bit about your own journey and what first sparked your interest in statistics, economics, and law.
I think, Ashutosh, it all really begins with what you read and what you grow with.
Correct.
So I grew in a family of teachers, both parents teachers, father, kind of teaching mathematics, and mother teaching languages. And so therefore, mathematics was a very natural sort of in the DNA, I would say. And so therefore, playing with numbers, even if you hold a ticket in your hand, what's the sequence? You used to get those bus tickets, which we used to travel in Mumbai. So you already, start looking at sequences and, what the odd and even numbers are, etc. And I think that was a lot to do with my, sort of I would say the attraction towards mathematics and statistics. Economics kind of came in as in 1989, I did my 10th standard. I passed my 10th standard. And if you remember, this was the time when we were really looking at, the glasnosts and perestroikas of the world, those kind of debates happening in Soviet Union. And I was reading the newspapers and started reading much more. And that kind of pushed me to understand political economy a little bit better. But then I decided that, why not really pursue it after my 12th grade, wherein I did not do my engineering, but decided to pursue my bachelor's in statistics, economics, and mathematics. And then, of course, I had wonderful teachers who kind of pushed me to think on these subjects, present papers. And that's what, kind of really pushed me into economics and statistics. Over a period of time, law was a very interesting entry point because through my career, when I used to work with one of my first jobs was with one of the most revered statistical agency. It's an independent agency called CMIE. And, that kind of pushed me towards understanding the relationships between law, economics, statistics. And then it just grew. I then worked with Tatas and, gradually when I started doing all this, I understood, and that was the time when India was also going a lot of regulatory reform, opening up of the economy, right? So a lot of this culminated, I would say, and then my interest in the World Trade Organization, wherein it was all about law, political economy, statistics coming together. And I did a lot of work with an organization called Consumer Unity and Trust Society. I consider Pradeep S. Mehta as my guru there. And essentially, we worked on many issues of national importance. And that pushed me towards understanding or finding value at the intersection of law, economics, and statistics. So that's kind of a story, Ashutosh, which is
fascinating. Fascinating. And, you transitioned from academia to becoming a global research leader. Your work has also been featured in publications like the Harvard Business Review. What has been the most impactful research insight that you have shared so far? And this may be a little bit of an unfair question to you.
No, but I mean, I've always loved doing academic research because I've always believed that academic research gives you a lot of rigor, and it lays a very important emphasis on methodology, which I believe is the backbone of any good research. And so in 2013, under the guidance of my mentor, Robert Thomas, who's known as Bob Thomas, he's a very leading management guru. And I used to be with a large, I would say a global, kind of a behemoth in technology at that point of time. Essentially, uh, what happened was he pushed me to say, Raghav, can you really push the boundaries of using methodology in the context of case studies? And the whole point there was that we were using actually algorithms, by the way, at that point of time, which I'm talking about 2030,
Sure.
which are generally used in statistical, kind of, or quantitative data to actually get insights from qualitative data. And that was pretty interesting. And at that point of time, under the guidance of Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, who was the Director General of CSIR and who has been the chairman of several innovation councils and boards of companies, Bob Thomas, and a couple of others, who I gathered from different parts of the world, leading gurus in their own field from different universities. We did a very interesting research on, how do companies actually start building inclusive business models? And that was a very new topic at that point of time. And the point was that the notion at that time was anything that you do out of a company which is good is through CSR. And I wanted to sort of do something because I was looking at examples and I was not sure whether this was a correct representation of reality. So I did a research under the guidance of these mentors, and we collated a sample across, I would say, 7 odd countries of companies. And through interviews of those experts and the qualitative analysis, we used an algorithm to identify what are the key factors. And that research was absolutely regarded as one of the big contributions to research, so much so that at the Academy of Innovation and Entrepreneurship Conference in 2013 at Oxford, that research paper got the pioneering award, the award for pioneering contribution to literature. And I was elated because I was not knowing a lot of this because I'm not a hardcore academic, but it was interesting. And the most interesting insight we got out of that, and which made a very big impact on my mind, is you can do good while doing business. So there is nothing that stops you from doing good for society while doing business. And that by doing good is a very important part that you can make of your business model, and as a result of which you can grow, create new markets, and build value for the nation or the society where you are. So that was one of the biggest insights I've ever, kind of got from the research I've done.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing this. You also served on prestigious juries like Tata Innovista and MTech India.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate truly breakthrough innovation?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned in this journey when I was a jury, and thanks to so many supporters in my life who have actually given me these opportunities, and I'm very grateful to life, for presenting these opportunities to me. One of the biggest learnings in terms of what's a breakthrough idea is that have you thought about the execution of it? Right? Because you can have amazing ideas, right? You can, and the world is not short of great ideas, but what they lack is a backbone of execution. If I were to give a cricket analogy, we all like Michael Holding a lot. I mean, at least the people from my age group, right? When we used to see Michael Holding, we used to use terminologies like the deer, right? Or Richard Hadley, like the deer, right? Why? Because their follow through was one of the cleanest in their bowling actions. And in the context of, I would say, great ideas, it's the follow through that matters, right? So the follow through is a very important thing. And I think in those, and again, I did all this in the 2017, 2018 times, and this was a era when the startups were really coming up. There was a lot of buzz around them. They were at a very preliminary phase of their growth. A lot of the ones that you see who are billion-dollar ones today. And so therefore, it was very interesting to learn from them. I learned from them a lot in terms of, how they think, how they think about value, what value means to them, and more importantly, what's the follow through that they have. The second thing I think which really distinguished a lot of those breakthrough ideas from the ones that have not gone a long distance is the fact that they meant something for the nation. They meant something for the society. And I think those were, very, very, I would say, deeply impactful lessons I took back, which is follow through, the impact on society, and more importantly, that there has to be something new which, not only businesses would value, but people would also value.
Very well said. Great response. One more question, and then I want to move to the 100 rupee ambulance.
Sure.
You have a high pressure career, uh, which is a full time role, and yet you are also giving a lot back to society. As someone passionate about both social welfare and business, how do you balance commercial goals with social purpose?
I think they are never at crossroads.
Okay.
I think what is at crossroads is our value systems, right? Uh, See, commercial goals are commercial goals. And the point is that when you are also working in a professional organization such as the where I am, we follow ethical principles to the core, right? We are just not, kind of sort of building value for our clients by sacrificing those. And they are extraordinarily primary for our existence too. So that's what I'm saying, that, if you start really looking at your commercial and your social, or, the life where you lead, where you want to help people as two different axes, then, the whole point is that you want to be on that right hand side where you have high values and high execution, right, in both the boxes. And I think that's where you really need to see them together, in the sense that you need to find time. So when you're doing your own job, when you're kind of busy with your own work, I think as a human, as something that the society, kind of you've grown in, you are, I would say, liable to give something back.
Well said.
It's your duty.
Correct.
It's your responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, if you don't miss out on those value frameworks, you automatically start that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Raghu, let's now talk about your amazing initiative, which is the 100 rupee ambulance. What was the inspiration to start 100 rupee ambulance during the COVID crisis? Tell us a little bit about the first trip the ambulance made.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. The first trip, and that's a good one. Jogging my memory, but and I'll come to the source of inspiration. I think on many occasions, it's always your near and dear ones that are a source of inspiration. And it all started with my mother several years back. She was with us. While having food, she complained of a heartache. Initially, of course, as you always say, gas hoga, that kind of typical reaction of a household.
Yeah.
But then it turned out that it was not something like that. And she continuously complained. I called an ambulance. I started dialing numbers, no response. Then someone comes with an ambulance, which is very poor. The stretcher is not good, it's stained. And then, you get charged a bomb, essentially, to even go 50 meters from your house. This is something that remains with you. Especially, and that's what I said, if you're a socially conscious individual, these kind of things that happen to your dear ones, you start thinking them from a lens of society. As to, you start giving it a scale to say, what would be happening, to people who would be undergoing this daily, from various stratas of economy. And then during COVID, right, when I was down with COVID myself, and so was my wife, we were both seeing ambulance services, unfortunately, fleecing people. It was not a great action.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I was seeing rickshaw pullers, vegetable vendors. They were taking people to hospital. So vegetable vendors literally taking people to hospital, and admitting them because they were not getting ambulances. And what, they were charging $10 and $20.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas the ambulances were charging, I don't know how much, right? And that, inspired me to say, this is the right time. Raghav, you can't, you can't now stop, because it's your duty to give it back. You're in a position to do it financially. And I got up from my COVID, carried a check of whatever, 17,50,000 to Tata Motors, gave them that check. They asked me whether I owned a trust or whatever. And I said, no. Then they said, why do you need an ambulance? And I shared my idea. And as if I, and I love the Shah Rukh Khan dialogue, and I'm a movie freak, so I can tell you this, कि अगर आपकी जिद है तो पूरी कायनात इकट्ठा हो जाती है, right? That's what he said. And I think that's true. I mean, the chauffeur came in without being asked. The Tata Motors guy said, no, no, you have to get the first ambulance that comes out of our system. So
Mm,
they gave me the ambulance in 20, 25 days.
mm.
Everything started falling in place. And my family said, if it's for a good cause, then why not?
Yeah,
We'll sacrifice our holidays.
correct.
And, because this requires an investment. So I said, perfect. Once your family, once the people and the ecosystem around you are with you, why not?
How
And then
wonderful.
it started. And my first trip was very interesting, wherein one thing which I realized, right? So a gentleman called us from a hospital nearby, and he said, I just read about you because it was, I think the news got carried in Hindustan Times or something of that sort.
Hmm, hmm.
And apparently somebody read about it and they said, why not call? So they called and he said, my father needs to get out from the hospital, and I'm not getting an ambulance to go, like 2 sectors away in Vashi, which is like 10 minutes drive, and people are charging me like $2,000 or whatever. So I said, perfectly fine. And we took him. And my first trip in that ambulance, along with the chauffeur, was wherein I realized that how poor have we planned our buildings,
Hmm.
wherein there was absolutely no place to take even the stretcher through the staircase because there were no lifts in that building.
Right.
And more importantly, we literally carried that gentleman on our shoulders with a portable oxygen cylinder because he was just recovering from COVID at that point of
Mm,
time.
mm,
And we were with our masks and everything, but we were literally carrying that person on our shoulders, literally.
mm,
And I
mm,
remember that with a portable oxygen cylinder, helping him to, get in there. And he was so thankful to us and blessed us. And
mm.
since then, it's just been a journey of blessings.
Incredible.
But that's how my first journey was.
Wow. You've completed over 1,700 trips.
Yes.
Um, what goes into curating a trip like that in terms of the ambulance, the medical equipment, and all the stuff that goes in when you're taking someone who's unwell
Hmm.
to a hospital?
I think it really requires that E called empathy at the
Hmm.
very back end.
Yeah.
It's not sympathy. If you do it with sympathy, then the whole, and I'm, sort of going into the philosophical dimension of it because it's very important.
Yeah.
Because when it's sympathy, it is daya. When it is
Hmm.
empathy, it is responsibility. It's
Hmm.
a goddamn difference,
Correct.
right? Because I don't want to show sympathy. I'm no great person to show sympathy to anyone. I'm
Correct.
just doing my job. I'm
Hmm.
doing my responsibility as a citizen,
Hmm.
right? So the whole point is it is empathy. And I think it all starts with a very simple conversation.
Hmm.
On many occasions, it's the conversation that keeps the patient and their relatives sane.
Hmm.
Listen to them. What are they asking for? Give them a polite ear. They've never heard that kind of a voice in an ambulance service. So it's
Hmm.
very welcoming for them. Talk to them. And I take those calls myself,
Hmm.
right? So, so it's interesting, right? So when you get called, you first talk to them,
Hmm.
ask them, how are they? So that journey starts with that conversation. It's not
Hmm.
with the ambulance.
Hmm.
Then you ask them, what kind of an ambulance do they need? And because I don't have a cardiac ambulance, I just have one ambulance, which is a patient transportation
Hmm.
ambulance.
Hmm.
And I don't want to fleece my people,
Yeah.
right? They are my, gods. So the whole point is that essentially asking them, telling them that this is the truth, asking them which floor they are on, telling them that we just have a chauffeur and that, we will need help to, kind of admit people. So do they have that help? Do
Hmm.
they need me to come at that site at a given point of time? Which
Hmm.
I've done on several occasions because people do need that kind of an understanding.
Hmm.
And then, kind of the journey begins where the chauffeur goes, people, sort of work with him, we
Hmm.
understand what's required. And and I can tell you, I mean, it's an amazing experience
Yeah.
when people, just call me back and say, how can you even do this in 100 rupees? And
Hmm.
I just have to say that, this is my seva, this is my responsibility.
Hmm.
So, and that's it, the whole topic ends there.
Yeah.
Uh, and that is how the 1700 have continued.
Amazing. And from the time you started, how has this whole amazing initiative that you started, how has this evolved? And what are some learnings?
So I think the biggest sort of the way the initiative has evolved is, and you have to be very careful of this because you can imagine you start during the COVID days and
Hmm.
people are already angry about ambulances. So the whole initiative began, and boom, I mean, I was very surprised that the All India Radio is carrying me, Doordarshan is carrying me. And I was frustrated. I mean, I'm not the guy who likes, this kind of publicity, because I believe that it's important to serve, really prove
Mm,
yourself, be down to earth, deliver some value, and then start talking about it. Even when, when my friends have spoken about your wonderful podcast, and I was told about it even, maybe in the second year. I said, no way. I need to complete, 4 to 5 years. I
mm,
need to see whether I can add value. I need to be consistent in
mm.
doing this, because these are professional ethics
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
carry from your workplace to the
correct,
social jobs that you do,
correct, correct.
right? And one of the biggest, some of the biggest learnings for me is that please do not make, sort of or compromise with little
Mm,
things. Told, oh, why buy a second ambulance? Why don't you buy a smaller ambulance? And I said, come on, they're patients. How dare do you even make that suggestion?
yeah.
Right? So I bought a large patient transportation ambulance, ensured that it is cleaned every Sunday, and those fundamental things which I don't think many services do,
Mm, mm,
right? But that was one. The second one, the biggest learning was that you can be cautious, but you cannot be just afraid. So
mm.
you have to take that risk.
Yeah.
And that's some of these learnings which you were asking me about, which came from my yesteryears, right? Of understanding what went into MTech, or what went
Mm,
into Tata Vista, or the inclusive business models I did, the research. All these were coming back to me. So Raghav, take that leap of faith, do it. पीपल वर स्केरिंग मी, अरे लेकिन पेशेंट अगर
mm.
गुजर गया तो क्या होगा? फिर तू पुलिस केस हो जाएगा, फिर तू उसमें अटक जाएगा. आई सेड, होगा तब देखेंगे, क्रॉस द ब्रिज व्हेन इट
Correct,
कम्स.
correct.
कि इसके लिए मैं सेवा तो रोक नहीं सकता. आई कांट स्टॉप
Mm,
सर्विंग पीपल
mm,
बिकॉज ऑफ दैट,
mm, mm,
right? So that was like the first lesson. The second thing is, people are looking for your service, not your greatness. So
mm.
talk about your service, be professional, just keep delivering day in and day out. It's
Right.
not about you becoming some icon. This is not about this,
Correct.
right? This is about you giving back to society as a responsibility, right?
Mm,
That one. The third one is, there is a lot of common sense in people, ordinary people. Allow them to use it. Allow them to help you understand what it is all about. And,
right.
therefore, in my own journey, there is so much I've learned. And as a result of that, I've just written a small book of
Mm,
90 odd pages called 100 rupees life, 100 rupees ambulance, some life lessons. And it's on Amazon. And the point is that the idea there was to inspire somebody. And the
mm.
most important thing I learned is, you don't need to retire to do something good in your life as a
Correct.
professional.
Correct.
You can do good when you're working. And that was the
Absolutely.
whole idea of, kind of doing this.
Amazing. Amazing. One more question, my last question for you.
Sure,
What
sure.
role do you think citizen-led micro initiatives like the 100 rupee ambulance play in the broader healthcare ecosystem in our country?
Right. It's an excellent question. And I think, the healthcare ecosystem functions, and it is doing what it can.
Mm,
But I think the role that we play is to build the trust in that ecosystem. I think what people are looking for, especially when one falls ill, is, can I get some help? Can somebody please listen to me? Can
mm,
somebody understand what I'm going through?
mm,
And then comes the medication. Unless and until you are at a situation where it's like a heart attack or something, where you require medication on the spot,
mm.
etc. But
Yeah.
on many occasions when people are down, I mean, I have dialysis patients who are my, sort of regular ambulance users, or I have cancer patients who use my services regularly. When you talk to them, it's all about listening to them.
Yeah.
And I think the micro players, if they can even elevate that trust in that ecosystem, to
Mm,
say, we are here for you, we are here to serve you,
yeah.
we are here to be with you in this journey, I
Mm,
think a lot, sort of evaporates. I can tell you a very interesting incident. There is a gentleman, he's a very old guy. He's from Mumbai. He knows that my ambulance only operates in Navi Mumbai. He calls me randomly on any Sunday, only a Sunday in
mm.
the evening. And there is no motive for that call. He just said, "आपकी आवाज सुननी थी." That's all. I
Mm,
just wanted to talk to you.
amazing.
And I can tell you, when I started with this initiative, there were lots of old people who called me sobbing. They were crying, they were emotional, they were in tears and saying, I wish we could do this. I wish my son did this. I wish my daughter did this. I wish we build the trust that you're trying to build in the system. And I think that's the role that we need to play.
Oh,
What
wonderful.
this country needs today is people who can believe and build trust in the society. There
Correct.
are enough bad things happening. We need not be just, kind of criticizing and only lamely criticizing. We need to repair it ourselves. And I think the journey begins with us.
Amazing. Raghav, on that note, all that I can say is that I've seldom come across someone who is so positive and who is so keen to deliver what your own internal thoughts are. Thank you for talking to me about your own journey. Thank you for the amazing work that you're doing with the 100 rupee ambulance. I just loved what you told me about talk less, listen to people because everyone has something good to contribute and build a lot of trust. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.